Well, folks, we're 3 weeks in, and that means you're either feeling good or bad. There's no middle ground, really. And the question is, how do I adjust? If at all. Do you stand pat? Drain the swamp? To answer that question, you might need to ask another question. What does my team deserve? Sometimes an 0-3 team should be 2-1. A 2-1 team should be 0-3. But to really get to the bottom of what you should do about your team, you might have to ask another question. What do you deserve? That guy who drafted it as an RB2, he was never going to be one. In fact, he's doing great at his God-intended role as an RB4 bench player, morale guy. I mean, he's doing perfectly in that role. It's really your fault for expecting him to be an RB2, for drafting him like he was an RB2, and for playing him week after week as an RB2. And so maybe it's time to man up, take some ownership over your mistakes, and do something about it. The definition of insanity is unsolicited monologue. And so I ask you again, what do you deserve? Have you volunteered lately? Have you given blood? These are actions you can do to maybe make the world a better place. Just like cutting some dead weight on your roster, benching some players that aren't coming through, getting some new players off the waiver. They might make your team a better place. Take some accountability, goddammit. Make a change. It might just be the difference. And with that said, let's whip around the league. The Diddy survivors caught a charge and absolutely ass-blasted Rammsteins this week. 156-89. It was a duo of Eagles leading the way for the survivors, with Saquon putting up 33 and Dallas Goedert 24. Jonathan Taylor also pitched in with 26. Those three alone nearly matched the Rammsteins lineup that has been ravaged by injuries. 5 players were out this week, and so you can't really blame the team that much for only putting up 89 points, but no matter what, it's still an L, and that L drops Rammsteins to 1-2, sit in 9th place, while the survivors improved to 2-1 in 5th place. Next up, last place gang, no longer in last place, as Paul picked up his first win versus the Thomas Crook Crawlers. The gang got a good performance from Roma Dunze and Chuba Hubbard en route to a 44-point win. So a very nice victory over a Crawler squad that got no help from anyone on their roster, particularly not from Mark Andrews, who put up a big fat bagel, leading the Crawlers to a season-low 62 points. Both teams sit at 1-2, with last place gang in 10th place and Thomas Crook Crawlers in 11th. The fuckers, yep, they fucked again. Except unlike the first 2 weeks, where they came from behind to win, this week they fucked good old-fashioned missionary, putting up 152 points to beat the Miller Lowlives by 74 points. Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones led the way. Meanwhile, for the Lowlives, was a return to earth after a monster week last week, putting up 168, and this week only 78, so 90 points less. Tough look. Raheed Shaheed put up a 0. Calvin Ridley and Brandon Cooks combined for 4 points, so 3 players getting you 4 points certainly doesn't help. The Lowlives dropped to 1-2 in 7th place, and the fuckers sit in number 1 at 3-0, of course. And speaking of the fuckers, we have a trade to announce. Our first major trade of the year, I'd say. Garrett Wilson going from the fuckers to the Bonezone for Jalen Waddle, a straight 1-for-1 swap. When asked, the fuckers owner says, Wilson is on game 3 of doing nothing for me, and I don't like what I see from Aaron Rodgers. Good chance he scores for you down the road. In fact, Garrett Wilson scored about 5 minutes after that trade was finalized. Meanwhile, the Bonezone was quoted as saying, I still need a running back. Don't look now, folks, but Smack Beavo is getting hot after a horrific week 1. The Teamo put up a solid week 2 win against last place gang. This week, however, Jack Evans' big bad Teamo, Smack Beavo's big bad AI Teamo, exploded, outscoring Yahoo projection by 58 points to put up a 158-101 win over the league extraordinary retards. Charbonnet, Neighbors, and Deontay Johnson led the way, each putting up 20-plus points for the Teamo. Meanwhile, the retards had a decent week, but couldn't overcome a lack of production from their running backs in general, with Jordan Mason being the highest scorer there with 9.5 points. Jack Beavo improves to 2-1, sitting in 4th place. Meanwhile, the league, after a good week 1, has dropped their last 2 and sits at 6th place with 1-2. They 1-2 record. The Bonezone were buried by Diggsy Grave this week and are now in a deep hole at 0-3. It was a solid win for Diggs, fueled by a great week from QB Jaden Daniels, who looks like he has the goods. Meanwhile, the Bonezone, it was a pitiful performance for them. All around, with only one wide receiver running back scoring more than 10 points, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And the Bonezone drops to 0-3 in last place, while Diggsy Grave sits in second with 3-0, one of the 2 undefeated teams. Bonezone is quoted as saying it's lonely at the bottom. Finally, Mark Fitzgerald muzzled the Dogs and handed DP and the Rotten Dogs their first L. Josh Allen, DK Metcalf led the way for Mark as they outscored their projection by 40 points, while the Rotten Dogs underscored their projection by 40, largely in part due to duds from Tyreek Hill and T. Higgins, as well as the Raiders' defense scoring a negative 0.5 points this week. Fitzy is in the win column at 1-2 in 8th place. Meanwhile, the Rotten Dogs drop to 3rd at 2-1. Quickly go through some rumors around the league. I heard that Jeff is shopping QBs. Bonezone hunting an RB2. Corey JO's to sleeper app. LeBlanc eats the pussy like a Haitian immigrant. And Jack is going to start Taysom Hill just as God intended. And here's your commissioner tip of the week. After the 1 o'clock games are played, if someone on your bench that you weren't sure if you were going to keep him, you wanted to see what they did this week, and now they put up a dud in the 1 o'clock games or maybe in the Thursday night game, you can drop them and pick someone up for the 4 o'clock games that haven't started yet. Once the game starts, then players are put on waivers, but you can actually pick someone up before the game starts and drop someone who already played and didn't, or is playing and not putting up a good performance, and that way, hey, it's a free pickup. You might end up dropping them anyway, but, hey, I want to take a look at that wide receiver. If he puts up 20 points, all of a sudden, he's going to be hot on waivers, but you already have him for free without spending a waiver spot if you pick him up before the game starts. So just a little tip. Other than that, so far so good. I'm looking forward to week 4. Free Vic.